Hello and welcome to another Atyplin Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video where I give you the contextual understanding, hopefully a bit more information, the juicy nuggets to get your teeth into concerning the war in Ukraine. Where shall we start today? Well, let's go to the video I showed you yesterday. This is of a column that is destroyed. And I thought this is really impressive. Not only is there a T-90 tank, which is a very modern, or the most modern tank that the Russians actually use, and a bunch of other equipment, and it was all blown up, and the column was not in a good way. This happened, I think, back in September. There's footage coming out now. I just thought it was worth looking at and asked, what did that? Would that be ATGMs, sort of those are the shoulder held or otherwise rocket launchers, anti-tank weaponry, or is it some other kind of thing like HIMARS or artillery? And some of you are saying, oh no, definitely not HIMARS. Well, it turns out I should have looked at the next tweet from Ukraine Weapon Tracker, which says that the convoy was reportedly targeted by Ukrainian HIMARS back in September, but footage from the ground appeared only now. So this is what it looked like from above. Apparently it was a HIMARS strike. I don't know whether that's definitely 100% true, but no reason to think it wasn't. Anyway, I just thought I'd say that because it's all about correcting myself if I'm wrong, or answering questions if I answer those questions. Here is, and speaking of corrections, accuracy is important. Apparently, the Christmas decorations with the big Z and V symbols that I showed yesterday, apparently they are photoshopped. A few people have told me, so I just want to say that there is a high probability that those aren't actually, real. And what I showed you wasn't actually Christmas decorations, illuminations in Moscow or wherever. They could well be photoshopped, so apologies if that is the case. So here's another one from Ukraine Weapons Tracker talking about 3 Uragans. So these are the multiple launch rocket systems that they aren't guided, they're dumb, but they send off a whole bunch of them at once. So 3 of these rocket launchers and 2 transport loaders and 2 cargo trucks destroyed by the Ukrainian army near Yehidny and Kharkiv Oblast. Just the amount of damage there, but the amount of cost in terms of replacing that, and the Russians don't have that capability anymore. Again, this is all about the consistent degradation of the Russian capability by hammering at this, so they have less capacity, meaning they have less capability to do damage against the Ukrainians. So that's a really important hit there. Okay, let's go to Pisky. Pisky, where is Pisky? So just to let you know, Donetsk, the city of Donetsk, which is on this Donetsk front, Luhansk up here, Kharkiv even further up. So this is Kharkiv. Down to Donetsk, you've got the city of Donetsk, and if you've been following my map updates, you'll know that Pisky is this area just to the west of Donetsk, and the Russians have been making inroads just past there. So they took them ages to take Pisky, and then they're now at Pervomaisky, Vodyanye, and Opitnye. I've shown you footage of a tank battle in Pervomaisky, which shows that this place is just completely apocalyptic. The buildings are destroyed. No one lives there. It's absolutely horrific. Well, here is the gloriously liberated Pisky that the same sort of activity happened at before. And just, I'll only show you the first few seconds, but this is a Russian propaganda video for a drone user. But this is Pisky here. This is what they've done in liberating this town. So that's lovely that you've liberated Pisky. I'm sure everyone that has a house there is particularly happy with that. This is what Pisky looks like after the Russian liberation. So there you go. Russian Z drone shot down by Ukrainian unmanned aircraft in a dogfight. This came out a couple of days ago. I was going to show you, but ran out of time. A quadcopter that is actually hovering underneath another a Ukrainian drone, and this is what happens. So just to show you, you've got a drone on top of this Russian one. Whether the Russian one knows that this drone is here, because obviously it's looking down, I don't know. And then one would think that the drone above it, the Ukrainian one, is a bigger drone, because it seems to have well, I suppose the rotor blades might be on top here, so the rotors are going to get hit if this hits the Ukrainian drone from underneath, and that's the end of that drone. So drone on drone warfare. But actually, this is something that's been considered before. I showed you one previously, which is actually down here, and I will show you that again, just because not everyone watches all my videos, and it's worth looking at this again because it is interesting. So this looks like a drone on drone attack. So we have another similar quadcopter there. Might even be the same make. In fact, it looks like it, doesn't it? Oh no, that's another one. No, that wasn't one I thought it was. So that was another quadcopter getting taken out on an impact. And we haven't got there was a footage of another one where it looked like it was shot out of the sky by another drone. So the drone had some kind of capability of taking out the other drone. Which was fascinating. Anyway, so that's that happening. And speaking of drones, in the UK, an experiment was conducted with the evacuation of a wounded soldier using the Malloy T400 drone. We are reminded that the UK will provide Ukraine with Aeronautics T150 drones. I'm not sure what they are, but they're capable of delivering military equipment and ammunition to the front line. There's been a lot of R&D with drones, obviously, over the last decade, but particularly in light of the Ukrainian war, everyone is recognizes how important drones are and what they could do. In this case, you can save a helicopter and helicopter pilot crew from being shot down if you can do the same job with just a very big drone. So here, I'm just interested to see what port that is. Like, I live near Portsmouth, which is our naval port, and this doesn't look like Portsmouth. There's no chimney like that, so this could be Plymouth or somewhere. But certainly a capable-looking drone there. That's a big old piece of kit, but it's a lot cheaper than a helicopter. And if you could have some of them flying around, you can get injured people back to somewhere safe, back in that golden hour where they need medical attention within the hour, and then they have a much greater chance of surviving. So that's interesting to see. Okay, here we have our good friend Ramzan Kadyrov, who is basically a Chechen warlord who has been supporting the Russians in his war. Islamic basis to belief system, hence the beards and whatnot. Kind of a weird relationship with Russia and the Orthodox Christianity that Russia is now using to its advantage. But here we have Kadyrov's son, who doesn't look like Kadyrov. So a Ukrainian news site has pointed out the scandalous excess of the Kadyrov family. The Chechen warlord's 15-year-old son was pictured here with a watch supposedly costing $1.4 million. The rest of this outfit isn't cheap either, at over $200,000 or $3,300, 200,000 rubles. So just a very expensive setup for Kadyrov's son, and that shows that he's your typical warlord, doing warlordy things and getting a lot of money for that. It's not about bringing along your people, morally speaking, and leading by example. No, of course, it so often isn't with these kind of authoritarian, autocratic, warlord type leaders. Okay, this is a nice bit of footage, just because it shows the Ukrainian kit that seems to be pretty decent in a lot of scenarios. So here's a Ukrainian Mi or Mi-24 cockpit video. This is actually the gunner or operator compartment. Note the Western style crew helmet and modern overalls, hopefully offering improved protection to the crew. And there is Come Back Alive, our one organisation that's been working to improve helicopter crew survivability. So that's really good. There's an organisation actually looking at giving these guys stuff so that they can survive better. Just look at that. It almost looks like we could be watching Star Wars. Oops, sorry, I accidentally pressed the wrong thing there. It's him firing a gun. And just got decent looking kit. And I think that, you know, the best thing about this video is not the fact that he's got all this very modern, decent equipment and overalls and whatnot, but the fact that he's got one of the healthiest ginger beards that you could ever hope to have. I can dream of being that ginger now. I'm now just basically white and grey. So, as I've said before, the Ukrainians win this war on beards alone. Um, Russian beards are just, you know, there's a few Chechen beards, but basically they don't compare. Okay, now moving on to what Ukraine really need here: transformers. So to get their electricity network back up, their distribution network, the Finnish Red Cross has stepped in to give them new and very important transformers. A whole warehouse or part of a warehouse, you know, full of these bits of kit that the Ukrainians desperately need. There have been a lot of countries stepping up to provide them with that kind of equipment. Here is another example. Korea is to send 20 high voltage generators to Ukraine, 5 electric mini excavators. Estonia has sent another 9 buses to Ukraine to help restore transport links, and Norway has airlifted another 155mm self-propelled gun, SPG, and with spare parts. So well done to all of those countries, and this is the kind of stuff that's going on every day. Really, countries are stepping in to help Ukraine. It's quite incredible, the international community, or at least part of the international community. And actually, it's probably a good time to talk about this, which is yesterday. So let's put that in the right order so I don't get completely confused with where I'm at. Yesterday, we heard about well, actually, no. Let's talk about Belgium first. So I was quite harsh about Belgium yesterday, but I was actually reading what Oryx was saying about how Belgium were like providing sleeping bags, but they haven't really provided a lot of military equipment. And Oryx went to town on them and said it was pretty shameful. Had various responses from Belgians in the thread to the video, with a couple of Belgians saying, "Yeah, it's terrible. Actually, we've been rubbish." Blah, blah, blah. And then someone else saying, "No, actually," but they're Belgian neoliberals saying that we've been concentrating on air. We've got like all these F-16 fighter jets, but probably too many of them. So we don't have the ability to provide them with this kind of stuff, but we could do this kind of stuff, but we're not providing planes. And it's a bit harsh to be that you know, critical about Belgium, and it's a bit more nuanced than that, so on and so forth. And these things are always nuanced, and Belgium might be helping in other ways as well. But I think it's really interesting today then to see that the Belgian Prime Minister is visiting Kyiv to meet with Zelensky. And so you can bet your bottom dollar that Zelensky is going to be saying, yeah, we need a load more stuff from you. Belgium is releasing new humanitarian and military aid, it says here. So this is De Croo himself. After heavy bombing in recent days, we stand with the people of Ukraine more than ever before. With the cold winter months ahead, Belgium is releasing new humanitarian and military aid. And again, it's not just about military aid, is it? It's humanitarian aid as well. And it's not just about those headline bits of military kit, but whether they are getting generators or medical equipment and all this other stuff, buses, forklift trucks, I don't know, tractors, stuff that can help Ukraine to operate as the society it wants to. Talking about this made me do quite a bit of thinking, actually. This is really super important. I've been wondering about this recently. And think about a way to put this into words with you guys. So Polish, Lithuanian, Ukrainian prime ministers held a Lublin Triangle meeting in Kyiv, signed a cooperation. The Lublin Triangle of Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania was created in 2020 for closer cooperation, reflecting also shared history of the 14th to 18th centuries. In a joint statement, and this is the important part, in a joint statement, prime ministers of Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine called on the international community to define the restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity, the liberation of the entire occupied territory of Ukraine, as a clear common goal. Now, let's discuss this a little bit. What has happened is that a lot of nations are saying to Ukraine, we'll support you. Whatever you need, we'll support you. But actually, and then a lot of nations saying, but actually, you need to really consider diplomacy. All wars end in diplomacy. You need to start getting diplomacy in place, and then starting to pressure Ukraine diplomatically towards those kind of ends. What this is saying, so no country has come out really and said Ukraine needs to get all of its annexed territories back. Like, we are going to support Ukraine get every single annexed region back. What they've said is we're going to support Ukraine doing what they want to do, but there's not been a common agreement, really, not that I've seen. Please correct me if I'm wrong. This is really useful. I think if more countries came out, if the UK, the US, if these countries come out and said, right, we've agreed with Ukraine that they should have the Donbass back and they should have the Crimea back, then you've got a very clear end goal and objective. And it's an objective that is a common objective, a clear common goal that everyone is working towards. It's not just about having slopey shoulders and saying, yeah, we'll support Ukraine no matter what. We're just not sure what that looks like or how far that's going to go. And there's no kind of clarity there. If you're saying, right, they need all of their territory back and Russia needs to be out of there and they can join NATO and they can join, you know, whatever it might be, just setting that out and signing to it and agreeing to it formally, I think is a really important and useful thing to do. I don't know. What do you guys think? This was going to be my last one. That's a nice positive one. We'll come to that at the end. This is a nice little segment on Sky News with Michael Clark, Professor Michael Clark. I do like him, giving his opinion on Surovikin, the butcher of Syria, who's now in charge of the Russian forces.
Okay, just finally, just talk to us about General Surovikin. He's the general who's in charge of this offensive now, isn't he, across the country?
He's the man who's behind all of this. I mean, it is his strategy. Our Ministry of Defence describe him as brutal and corrupt. Those are the words they use for him. And he's got a very checkered history of borderline, criminality. He's accused of many crimes, including shooting Russian soldiers, selling arms, and he gets away with all of them, or he's just regarded as a disciplinary problem, not a criminal problem. But he is very clever. And what we see in Ukraine now is the most coherent strategy they have had. And so he said, look, I'm not, and this is one of the statements he is believed to have made, he said, I'm not going to waste Russian troops' lives chasing fanatics who are armed by NATO around a guerrilla warfare. He said, we have technical means of making Ukraine surrender. And his technical means are to reduce the vulnerability of his own troops, to get them involved in battles that he thinks they can win, and then to put real pressure on civilian society, which is what all these attacks on the electricity grid are doing. It's what he's done in other places, in Syria, in Chechnya, in the Tajik civil war, in Afghanistan. He's a very experienced officer, but all of his experiences are from ruthless civilian-based offensives, and that's what he does.
Absolutely spot on. And I think it's also worth noting that's what he's doing, and he's got form. You look at what he's done in Syria and hitting hospitals and logistics and all the things like that. That is what Russia are doing right now in Ukraine. And it's less for him probably about winning in these particular regional points. You want to destroy the spirit of Ukraine, but also destroy them logistically speaking and practically speaking in terms of being able to operate as a society. And that's you know, on the one hand, actually, that's quite a clever way to do things, because it's clear to me, and therefore it should be clear to someone who's in charge of the Russian forces, that their armed forces are not able to overcome, in terms of capability, the Ukrainian forces. Ukraine have got NATO providing them with all sorts of equipment. And if it comes down to it, on the battlefield, really, Russia are going to lose. The only hope they've got of winning is by a Pyrrhic victory, by throwing in 1 million mobilized troops and just overwhelming the Ukrainians. But then the Ukrainians could equally do a mobilization that they haven't done. So the Ukrainians have an awful lot of reservists, an awful lot of population that they can call up to go on the front lines, given enough equipment, right, and ammunition and guns and whatnot. So the idea that Russia can easily win by doing that kind of mass mobilization overwhelming is up for debate. But that's all they've got. They're going to lose this. They're degrading their capabilities with every passing week. You know, all those vehicles I've shown you blown up just now, that is vehicles that Russia can't replace. They can't build them, they can't replace them because no one's giving them equipment. But NATO and loads of allies are giving Ukraine plenty of equipment, and there's lots more the headroom to go there. Like, do we go to the Patriots? Do we go to ATACMS? Do we go to tanks, main battle tanks, and all this kind of discussion? And so Surovikin knows this, or Surovikin knows this, surely must know this, and then says, right, in that case, we need to just use up all our cruise missiles to absolutely hammer the heck out of the energy system and all these other logistical systems of Ukraine, so that we destroy their civilian, life, because we're going to fail to do that effectively on the battlefield. And that's what pretty much his form dictates, and what Michael Clark is saying there. Talking about mobilized troops, we've heard stories about how so many mobilized troops have died over the conflict, or being sent in with poor equipment and poor training, and no food and all this stuff. Putin has been hassled by a group of mothers of one particular unit that was sent in, and supposedly 500 of them died, right? And the families and mothers have been really upset that Putin won't meet them, and then he's promised to meet them. It hasn't really happened, and then he finally met them yesterday, right? Except, and this is a bit like geolocation here, like it's the same sort of methods that they use. It wasn't really 18 mothers. It was actors and people who work in politics that we've seen with Putin before, pretending to be mothers. Putin finally had the courage to face the mothers and mobilize cannon fodder. Too bad someone found out that they are really actresses, and probably agents too, that appear with him in other occasions. So yes, Putin has zero kahunas, or whatever. These are people that are known to Putin, at least these two are, and you can imagine most of them will be in some way. It's completely staged propaganda, and he won't really have met with those people. Typical Putin. Russian opposition media claim that they received leaked data from the FSB, and again, this is thematically linked in terms of mobilization, and the general staff of the Russian armed forces, according to which the Russian leadership admits irretrievable losses of those mobilized by the spring of 2023. So Russia know there's leakage going out that at the level of 100,000 people. They understand that this in the inner echelons, higher echelons of command, they are aware that mobilized troops are getting absolutely done. The plan of the Russian leadership in this case boils down to the following: to stabilize the front line in the winter with the help of those mobilized, and in the spring to compensate for the losses of conscripts and start again to conduct offensive operations. Here's the idea that really what Putin and Surovikin is doing here is trying not to lose as many troops as they can. So maybe cooling it down, hitting the infrastructure. It's a waiting game. So if they can hold on, if this war can drag on for as long as possible, then Putin is hoping that the West will tire, get bored, or get restless, or not be willing to continue to give so much money to Ukraine, and maybe China will invade Taiwan, and there'll be other things on our minds, and he will win just by being able to hold on the longest. So this then leads back to the argument that the Ukrainians should be continuing their momentum now and pushing so that the Russian losses continue to be high, and that they can't hold on for that long-term objective. And talking about, well, this is actually a Wagner mercenary. In fact, this apparently is a Wagner commander by the name of call sign of Cherdash. Now, I'm not going to show you all of this, but this is something I've referenced previously. And this is desperately sad, in my opinion. Desperately sad. And I hope it's still appropriate for me to show what I'm going to show. So this is a drone that has at least 2 IEDs on it, right? That's above him. He knows this up there, right? And then he acts like this, which is he kind of points the gun at the wrong way. This is what I said the other day, but I didn't realize actually what ends up happening here. He knows it's there. He doesn't seem to be able to move much. There's a possible theory that he's got hypothermia. He hasn't got gloves on, which I find really fascinating. He points the gun at himself. He puts his sort of scarf around his face, points the gun at himself, and then it appears. He points it into his chest, and then he picks it up and turns it around and points it at the drone, and the drone flies off. And then because it thinks he's going to get shot at, but then it comes back, and the guy is just lying there. And I can't quite tell 100%, but it says up here that he decided to take his own life, so he actually does shoot himself, right? he shoots himself, and the drone then drops 2 IEDs by him. But his body is lifeless. It sort of moves, but it's not alive. And it's desperately sad. And you're thinking, and actually Michael Clark talks about this earlier on in this interview that I showed the end of. He talks about, and I've talked about this before, which is the 3 lines where you've got for the Wagner, you've got the recruits that are being taken from prisoners on the front line, and if they retreat, you've got the conscripts behind them, or the mobilized troops behind them, who are supposed to shoot them if they retreat. And then behind them, these are called barrier troops apparently, and then behind them you've got the normal Wagner kind of mercenary contractors who will shoot anyone that comes back their way as deserters. And what this means, so imagine this guy is on the front line, right? And if he runs forward, the snipers will take him out. The Ukrainians will kill him. If he runs back, his own side will kill him. He'll either get done as a deserter and get a sledgehammer in his head or whatever, or he'll literally get shot on the spot. So he's stuck here. He's then stuck there, like getting cold. He's got hypothermia, and then a drone is above him that's going to drop an IED on him. And he's like, whatever I do, just think about this psychologically, guys. Just think, like, if you were him, like, whatever I do, I am going to die. Not only that, but I'm in such a bad way health-wise now that I am almost dead as it is. Like, either if I stay here, I will die because nature will kill me. Like, the weather is killing me. If I go forward, the Ukrainians will kill me. If I go back, my Russian comrades will kill me. And if I stay here and nature doesn't kill me, the drone that I can hear above me with 2 IEDs is going to kill me. And in the end, he takes his own life. And if that doesn't sum up this front near Bakhmut, nothing will. I mean, desperate. You just got to feel sorry. This is a Russian. I don't know his background, but it's a human being just thinking there is no other way to exist. That I can't exist. Existence is too painful, or it's too pointless. I am going to die. So I will use the last vestiges of my control to take my own life. And at least I can dictate how I go. And it's just terrible. Just terrible. This sums it all up to me. Hugely powerful video, this. And then when you see the IDs just explode next to his lifeless body, it's just like, wow, just war is horrible. But the expectations of these guys, it's just terrible. And speaking of that, let's look at this. That actually Ben Smith, thank you, who's found me on Twitter, who's a subscriber, I believe, or watches my videos, my updates, sent me this, which is, I don't know where it comes from. It could be someone making this up, but this is all quite interesting, pertinent points. Winter claims its first confirmed Russian military victims in Ukraine. Winter-related casualties will be higher, but for Russian forces than for Ukrainian forces, simply because Russian forces are very poorly equipped for the cold weather. Think of that guy without even gloves on. Many Russian units deployed by Ukraine still don't have any winter gear and clothing. The majority of Russian forces in Ukraine are being forced to fight in winter conditions in summer gear and clothing. Russian units in Ukraine aren't getting heating fuel and generators for electric heaters, and are therefore forced to use firewood to keep themselves warm. This will make spotting Russian positions much easier for Ukrainian forces because campfire will be able to be easily seen on thermal imaging cameras being used by drones. These problems all exist for Ukrainian forces, but are much less acute and less widespread. Many countries have donated in total hundreds of thousands of sets of winter clothing to the Ukrainian army. Private organizations and foreign governments are giving tens of thousands of generators to Ukraine, and that can be used to operate electric heaters, among other necessary electric devices. Also, Ukrainian troops are rotated off the front lines much more frequently than Russian troops. I was telling you about this week. So the Russians have given evidence that the Svatova front line to Kremlin front line, the Ukrainians are rotating troops just all the time. They're just constantly getting rotated. And yet the Russians have been there since, some of these have been fighting since February. Like 9 months on the front line. How desperate must they be? Also, Ukrainian troops are rotated off the front lines much more frequently than Russian troops. This means the Ukrainian troops aren't exposed to the cold as much as and are less likely to die of cold exposure. There is a possibility that by the time winter is over, more Russian troops will have died from cold exposure than from combat in Ukraine during the winter. If this happens, it would be the first time since certain operations during the Korean War that more troops died of cold exposure than from actual combat operations. That, again, how desperately sad this whole thing is. Let's end on a positive note, which is a very cool looking buggy. I often wonder how useful these are, how used they are, whether they just look cool, but actually they don't have that much use, practical use. Or are they really useful? I don't know. I've not seen them in action other than this photo. This could be staged though. Ukrainian buggy with rear-mounted SPG-9 73mm recoilless gun in southern Ukraine. So here is this sort of dune buggy shooting a machine gun, and it looks very cool. And a Ukrainian, soldier looking pretty cool. And there they are. So I think this does look fairly staged, but it's very cool imagery nonetheless. And here it is seen about a week ago in Kherson. Again, very cool looking vehicle, very Mad Maxy. I wonder again, really how practical these things are. I guess if these guys are driving it around, it must be somewhat useful. I hope it is, because it looks cool. Anyway, there you go. I hope that was of use. Some pretty juicy things to get your teeth into, and certainly, ideas for you to have discussions in the threads below. Please do that. As ever, please like, subscribe, share. Remember that I am migrating these videos over slowly to my other YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@ATPGeo. I have a few videos on there now. This one will go on my normal channel, but tomorrow's one will go on there. Please subscribe to that channel, because everything will eventually be over there. It moved over in the next sort of 2 weeks or so. It's a long process for reasons that are a bit geeky or whatever, but that's where I'm moving. And if you want to support the channel in any other way, all the ways you can do that are in the description below, or you can buy some of my books or whatever. It just allows me to do this. Otherwise my partner will not allow me to do this, and that makes me sad, because this I find incredibly interesting, to the point where I am obsessed, and probably like you, equally obsessed with what is going on in this terrible conflict. Anyway, thanks for watching, take care, and I will speak to you tomorrow.